When they cuffed his hands, the old man did not react, he simply stared straight ahead, silent, as if accustomed to judgment. Someone in the courtroom snickered. A juror mumbled, "Just another troublesome old man." They didn't realize the imprisoned figure had once finished a conflict with a single bullet, and the only person who could confirm that was walking out of a black SUV, wearing 4 stars on his shoulders. Where are you watching from? Enter your city name. And if you believe that justice delayed is still justice, please subscribe. Edward Tom Granger had been looking after the Veterans Memorial in downtown Memorial Square for exactly 11 years. At 74, his frame carried the unseen weight of decades, yet his hands remained firm. Every morning at 0700, he arrived at the modest granite memorial nestled between the courthouse and the public library. The memorial was basic, a stone with the names of local servicemen and women who had given their lives. Most folks walked by without noticing it. Tom noticed everything. He carried the same tattered canvas bag every day, loaded with cleaning items he bought with his meager pension, including a soft brush for the carved letters, metal polish for the bronze plaque, and fresh flowers when he could afford them. His movements were meticulous and even ritualistic. Tom never talked about his history. The neighbors knew he was a veteran. The bearing, the standard haircut, and the manner he folded his flag every evening gave him away. But whose wars, branches, and battles? That remained a secret. On this Tuesday morning in March, Tom was polishing the bronze plaque when shouted voices interrupted his routine. 2 young men of college age were beside the memorial, fighting loudly about something Tom couldn't hear. Politics, most likely. "Keep it down, boys," Tom added quietly, without looking up. "Some people are trying to remember those who are no longer able to speak for themselves." The taller young man, dressed in a wrinkled t-shirt and fancy sneakers, turned to Tom with annoyance. "Mind your own business, old man. This is a public space." Tom agreed that it is still in functioning order, which is why we must all respect it. The argument resumed, louder now. Other people took note, with some stopping to watch and others crossing to avoid the ruckus. Tom gradually straightened, his rheumatic knees complaining. When he stood at his full height, something about his posture suggested he was not a man to be taken lightly. "Gentlemen," he murmured, his tone carrying despite its stillness. "I'm asking politely. Please take your debate somewhere." The shorter young man stepped forward forcefully. "Or what? Will you call security? Look around, grandfather. You are all alone here." Tom's gaze were riveted on something beyond them. A third person approached quickly, phone in hand, visibly upset. Tom knew the signals. Elevated heart rate, tunnel vision, and poor decision-making are about to occur. "Move aside," Tom ordered, stepping between the fighting couple and the approaching man. What transpired next would be discussed later in court. The third person, a young woman Tom had never seen before, claimed she was attempting to interfere when Tom shoved her, causing her to stumble and scrape her knee against the pavement. Her version was supported by the 2 initial arguers, who had suddenly become united against a shared objective. Within 3 minutes, cop cars had arrived. Within 5 minutes, Tom was crushed against the memorial he had attended for over a decade, his hands cuffed behind his back, while inquisitive bystanders raised their phones to record the arrest. "Assault and battery," the young officer said emphatically. "Unprovoked assault on a citizen." Tom said nothing. He had long ago learned that when the truth appeared to be inconsequential, quiet was the only suitable answer. As they brought him to the patrol car, he took one more look at his memorial. His cleaning supplies were scattered on the ground. His regular regimen was disturbed. The county courtroom holding cell was nothing new for Tom. However, the situation was different this time. He sat on the metal seat in excellent posture, hands folded and eyes concentrated on the opposite wall. The other detainees avoided him. Something about his quiet implied depths they did not wish to explore. When the public defender arrived, Tom recognized the type. Young, overworked, and mentally prepared for the next case. The lawyer, Mr. Granger, stated that he was consulting his file. "I am Jacob Martinez. I will be representing you today. The good news is that the injuries were mild. If we can work out a plea deal, we'll most likely be doing community service." "I will not be pleading for anything," Tom stated gently. Martinez looked up with amazement. Most elderly defendants wanted to avoid jail time. "Sir, with all respect, you were captured on tape. Several witnesses observed you push Ms. Henderson. The officer's report is really clear." Tom agreed that the report accurately represented what he saw. "Does not make it true. Mr. Granger, the truth is not always as essential as what can be established in court. The prosecution has camera footage, witness testimony, and a police report. What have we got?" Tom examined the young man's features. "We have the truth. That might be enough." 2 hours later, Tom was in Judge Evelyn Walker's courtroom. He was still dressed in the same clothing he had worn to the memorial that morning. He sat at the defendant's table, hands folded. His demeanor suggested a man attending a lecture rather than his own trial. The courtroom hummed with silent energy. Word had spread about the insane old man who had attacked a young woman at the war memorial. Several fans held their phones, trying to record a moment worth sharing. The bailiff revealed the case number, 2024 CR 1847. The People v. Edward Granger case involves fourth-degree assault and battery. Judge Walker looked at Tom with the tired expression of someone who has seen too many identical instances. Another elderly defendant behaving out, most likely seeking attention. The prosecution's case was easy. Officer Kyle Patterson, fresh-faced and confident, described arriving at a scene where several witnesses had reported an unprovoked attack. Patterson stated that the victim, Ms. Lena Henderson, was attempting to settle a quarrel when Mr. Granger physically pushed her to the ground. Several bystanders validated the account, and cell phone video confirms the physical touch. Ms. Henderson joined the stand next, with her knee still bandaged for dramatic effect. She stated feeling scared by Tom's aggressive posture and said she was merely attempting to assist when he aggressively shoved her. "I've never been so scared," she murmured, blotting her eyes. He appeared angry and scary. A cell phone video was played. Grainy footage clearly showed Tom's hands making contact with Henderson, followed by her fall. The context was hazy, but the physical contact was unmistakable. Tom remained still while the prosecution rested its case. His lawyer murmured urgently in his ear, most likely offering plea discussions, but Tom's expression remained unchanged. "Mr. Martinez," Judge Walker stated. "Does your client want to enter a plea?" Tom stood before his attorney could react. "Your Honor, I don't need someone to speak for me. They'll remember me or not." A ripple of bewilderment spread over the courtroom. Judge Walker scowled. "I strongly advise you, Mr. Granger, to consult with your counsel. With respect, Your Honor, I have spoken everything I wish to say." The jurors exchanged looks. Several appeared impatient, ready to deliver the obvious conclusion. "Why does he keep standing like this?" A juror whispered. "As if he were in the military or something." Another person said, "Probably stolen valor. According to my brother, many older men pretend to be warriors in order to gain sympathy." Ethan Collins, a teenager, had been half-watching while texting his father. But something about the defendant's demeanor drew his attention. The way Tom carried himself. A faint outline of something metallic on a necklace around his neck. Ethan raised his phone, zooming in. The image was grainy, but he could see what seemed to be military dog tags. He promptly texted the photo to his father, along with a message. "Dad, there is an unusual trial taking place. Do you think this is actual military?" Captain Danny Collins, USMC, retired, was in a conference when his son texted him. Something about the image caused him to excuse himself. He enlarged the photograph and studied the defendant's position. The way he held his shoulders. Then he noticed the dog tags. Danny Collins has served 30 years in the Marine Corps. He was aware of how actual veterans held themselves. And he understood the distinction between genuine military bearing and civilian imitation. The man in his son's photograph was not trying to be a soldier. He was a Marine. Captain Collins stepped outside and dialed a phone number that few people owned. A direct channel to the person who owed him a favor. "Sir," he began when the phone was answered, "I need you to run a name through the classified database. Edward Granger, roughly 74 years old, appears to be a former military member." 18 minutes later, a black SUV with government plates arrived outside the courthouse. The vehicle had no visible marks, yet its occupant wielded enough authority to halt traffic with a gesture. He said nothing, yet everyone fell silent. If you believe that silence can be more effective than any defense, type silent. General Jacob Kern stepped out of his SUV with controlled precision. At 62, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a significant battle. As he strolled into the courthouse entrance, the 4 stars on his shoulders reflected sunlight, compelling onlookers to stop and stare. Inside, the trial was progressing as planned. The prosecution had rested, the defense had waived evidence, and Judge Walker was putting together jury instructions. It was a basic situation with a foreseeable result. An old man would soon be found guilty of assault. Tom Granger remained immobile at the defendant's table, hands still cuffed and expression unchanging. Several jurors were already mentally preparing their verdict. Ms. Henderson sat in the first row, her bandaged knee visible, periodically blotting her eyes. The courtroom door opened gently, and General Kern entered without fanfare. He donned his dress blue uniform, complete with decorations, ribbons, and medals that recounted the story of a lifetime spent in perilous environments. His presence was magnetic. Conversations came to a halt as everybody turned to see who had garnered so much attention. Judge Walker glanced up from her notes. Recognition flashed across her face. She had seen him on television, speaking before Congress. This was General Jacob Kern, the strategist behind the decade's most effective counterterrorism campaign, Operation Eagle Flame. General Kern spoke clearly, "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but I have information relevant to this case." The prosecutor stood uncertainly. "Your Honor, this is exceedingly unusual. The lawsuit is virtually completed." "Sit down," Judge Walker ordered sternly, her gaze fixed on the general. "General Kern, please approach the bench." As the general moved forward, everyone in the courtroom stood reflexively, save Tom, who remained sat with his wrists shackled. When General Kern arrived at the front, he did something that surprised everyone present. He stood to attention and delivered a beautiful military salute to Tom Granger. The hush that ensued was profound. You could hear the air conditioner whirring, distant traffic, and the barely perceptible whisper of people holding their breath. Tom, still chained, managed to return the salute with a modest nod, an acknowledgement between warriors that transcended their circumstances. "General," Judge Walker inquired, "what is going on here?" General Kern turned to address the court. "Your Honor, members of the jury, and everyone present, you are in the presence of one of the best Marines to ever serve our country." He motioned toward Tom. "This is Gunnery Sergeant Edward Granger of the United States Marine Corps, who has served 3 tours in Vietnam and has participated in 2 classified missions that I cannot discuss in open court." The prosecutor began to object, but General Kern's raised hand stopped him. "During Operation Dewey Canyon 3 in 1971, then Corporal Granger served as my unit's designated marksman. We were caught down by enemy fire in a valley near the DMZ, suffering losses with no possibility of escape." The general's voice was firm, but emotion flashed across his features. "Tom, Gunnery Sergeant Granger, recognized the enemy sniper who had us trapped. One shot from an impossible distance, in impossible circumstances. That single bullet halted the conflict and saved 17 lives." He returned to Tom, "including mine." The courtroom stayed frozen. Several jurors were openly looking, their first assumptions eroding. Ms. Henderson was perplexed and uncomfortable when the narrative shifted. General Kern reached into his jacket and pulled out a little velvet box. Tom vanished from our unit following that mission, having been assigned to classified activities that are not public record. I've been seeking for him for 30 years. He opened the package and found a military insignia that glittered under the lights. This is the silver star that should have been given to him in 1971. Political issues and classification rules precluded the ceremony from taking place at that time. The general approached Tom's table. If this man is a criminal, I have spent my entire career following in his footsteps. Judge Walker discovered her voice. General, are you arguing that the defendant is not who the prosecution claims? I'm saying, General Kern said, that Edward Granger is precisely who he appears to be, a Marine who has spent his life protecting others while expecting nothing in return. He stared squarely at the shackled person. Tom has kept the memorial outside because the names on it include guys from our unit, whose families never got the complete story of how they died or who saved them when they were injured. The general's voice softened. He's guarded their memories for 11 years, not because anyone asked him to, but because Marines never abandon their brothers. Tom spoke for the first time since the trial started. The memorial required maintenance. No one else was doing it. General Kern nodded. Just like Tom, he always does what needs to be done without seeking attention. He turned back to Judge Walker. Your Honor, I respectfully request permission to submit evidence that will provide context for these events. The judge nodded slowly. The court will hear your evidence. General. General Kern pointed to the door, where two Marines in dress uniforms had entered, carrying file folders and surveillance equipment. The event at the memorial was captured on 3 surveillance cameras, the general revealed. The video shows Gunnery Sergeant Granger putting himself between heated people to avoid a physical conflict. When Ms. Henderson approached quickly from behind, Tom acted to stop what he saw as a potential threat to onlookers. The prosecutor stood weakly. Your Honor, while this is dramatic, it does not negate the fact that the defendant had physical contact with the victim. General Kern smirked grimly. You're correct. That reality remains unchanged. It explains it. The Marine started setting up a laptop and projector. What the cell phone footage does not show, and none of the witnesses realized, is that Tom was not attacking Ms. Henderson. He was preventing her from getting into what was about to be a violent conflict. The security camera video started playing. The footage was clear, capturing the entire incident from an elevated perspective. Tom's motions were clearly obvious in context. The way he positioned himself, the care with which he escorted Ms. Henderson away from the fighting zone, and the soft nature of the contact all constituted physical assault. General Kern emphasized that Marines are trained to assess and neutralize threats. Tom witnessed a fast deteriorating situation, with citizens at risk. He accomplished exactly what his training required. He protected innocent people. The courtroom remained silent as the facts unfurled on television. Ms. Henderson's face had turned pale, her story being refuted by objective facts. Judge Walker requested a brief recess to evaluate what had happened. As the room cleared, General Kern approached Tom, who remained seated and chained. Tom, the general continued quietly, I am sorry it took me so long to find you. Tom looked up, his eyes holding decades of whispered stories. You did not need to find me, sir. I was not lost. Maybe not, General Kern responded, but you were forgotten, and that is on all of us. Officer Patterson, who had made the arrest, stood uncertainly at the back. The cocky swagger he had showed before had vanished, replaced with the unsettling understanding that he had tied a true war hero based on faulty facts. Officer, General Kern summoned him. A word? Patterson approached reluctantly, his cheeks heated. Sir, I had no notion who he was. The witnesses each said. You performed your duty based on the knowledge you had, the general interjected. Nobody faults you for it, but you now have new information. The general's tone was not harsh, yet it conveyed authority. What important now is how you respond to fresh information. When court reconvened, the mood had entirely altered. The morning's disclosures had spread, and the gallery was packed with courthouse employees, local attorneys, and interested people who had heard that the Marine was being honored. Judge Walker returned with the demeanor of someone who had spent the interval questioning all she believed she knew. She said, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. In light of fresh evidence and testimony, I am directing you to reject the prosecution's case as given. The evidence plainly reveals that Mr. Granger acted as a protector, not an attacker." She turned to face the prosecution. "Does the state intend to continue with these charges?" The prosecutor stood and shook his head, understanding that he was losing the battle. "The state has moved to dismiss all charges, Your Honor." Motion granted. Judge Walker struck the gavel once. "Mr. Granger, you are free to leave." She paused and said, "Officer Patterson, please remove Mr. Granger's restraints immediately." Patterson hurried rapidly to unlock the handcuffs, trembling his hands as he released Tom's wrists. "Sir," he added calmly, "I apologize for the misunderstanding." Tom flexed his fingers, then glanced at the young cop with comprehension rather than fury. "You couldn't have known, son, but now you do." As Tom stood, General Kern approached him, bearing the velvet box containing the silver star. "Tom, this is long delayed." The general opened the box and gently pinned the insignia on Tom's shirt, the same civilian clothes he had worn that morning. The silver star shone against the plain fabric, altering Tom's image from bewildered old defendant to what he had always been, a distinguished veteran who had served with distinction. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Kern stated, "I present Gunnery Sergeant Edward Granger, Silver Star recipient, Purple Heart recipient, and one of the finest Marines I have ever served alongside." The entire courtroom rose in spontaneous applause. Judge Walker stood behind her bench. Officer Patterson came to attention and saluted. Even the court reporter had stopped typing to clap. Tom remained quietly among the acknowledgement, his military attitude more visible now that people understood what to look for. He wasn't comfortable with the attention, but he accepted it with the dignity of a man who had earned every moment of respect being provided. Ms. Henderson, the claimed victim whose testimony had started this process, approached Tom hesitantly, her bandaged knees suddenly looking theatrical rather than sorrowful. "Mr. Granger," she said, her voice quiet. I'm sorry, I misinterpreted what happened." Tom scrutinized her face then nodded. "Fear helps individuals see things that aren't there sometimes. No harm done." "But there was harm," she insisted. "I accused you of attacking me when you were attempting to help. And now you know different," Tom said simply. "That's what matters." General Kern witnessed this conversation with approval. Even in vindication, Tom remained who he had always been. A man more concerned in moving forward than ruminating on past wrongs. As the gathering began to disperse, a local newspaper reporter approached General Kern. "Sir, can you tell us more about Sergeant Granger's service record?" "What I can tell you," the general said, "is that Tom Granger symbolizes the finest of what America requires of its young people. He served when called, battled when necessary, and then came home and kept serving his community in quiet ways no one saw." 1 week later, the memorial in downtown Memorial Square looked precisely as it always has. Clean, well-maintained, politely managed. But now a little bronze plaque has been put near the base. This memorial is maintained by Gunnery Sergeant Edward Granger, USMC, Ratampinmani, Silver Star recipient. We neglected to recognize him for too long. We shall not forget again. Tom had disputed the plaque, stating that the memorial should memorialize the dead, not the living. But the city council had disregarded his reservations. Every morning at 0700 hours, Tom maintained his routine. Clean the stone, polish the bronze, care the flag. But now periodically other veterans joined him. Word had traveled through local VFW and American Legion posts, and a quiet brotherhood had developed around the memorial. Officer Patterson stopped by one morning during his patrol, parking his cruiser and walking over to where Tom was working. "Morning, Sergeant," he said, offering coffee from the cafe down the block. Tom accepted with a nod. "Morning, officer." "Quiet night." "Quiet enough," Patterson responded. "I've been thinking about what happened in court." Tom continued his job, waiting. "I learned something that day," Patterson continued, "about making assumptions, about taking time to really see people instead of just looking at them." Tom agreed that it was a good lesson. "It took me a while to learn it on my own." They stood in comfortable silence, watching morning commuters rush past the memorial, most of whom continued to ignore it. Patterson ultimately asked Sargent, "Would it be okay if I stopped by every now and then? Maybe you learned about the persons whose names appear on this monument." Tom looked at the young cop and saw real interest rather than obligation. Tom answered, "I'd be honored to tell you their stories. They deserve to be remembered by someone other than a retired Marine. The heroes among us may not always wear their medals, but they are present, standing guard when no one is looking. Share if you believe in recognizing those who have been overlooked for too long. Sacrifice cannot be measured by age or worn clothing. Some people have been silent for too long, not because they are weak, but because they do not need to be heard." Edward Granger never asked for recognition. He simply turned up every day to commemorate men who were unable to speak for themselves. When the system failed him, when assumptions took the place of investigations, and his good intentions were turned into criminal charges, he kept mute. Not from fear, but from respect. Sometimes it takes a 4-star general to remind us that heroes walk among us in civilian attire, carrying invisible scars and conducting invisible duty. They do not request parades, medals, or public recognition. They merely want not to be forgotten or have their intentions questioned while they continue to do what they have always done, defend others. Remember Tom Granger the next time you see someone giving silent service, preserving something others take for granted, guarding memories others have forgotten, or assisting without expecting to be recognized. Remember that the most significant tales are frequently left unreported until someone in a position of authority speaks up for those who refuse to speak up. Have you ever witnessed someone being underestimated and then vindicated? Please share your tale below. Some realities deserve to be brought to light. Subscribe to QH Incredible Stories, where quiet heroes receive the attention they have long deserved.